history is a sip of something you trust. A cup of tea. A home-cooked meal. A painkiller from the medicine cabinet. You swallow. You smile. You thank the person who gave it to you. And hours later, your body begins to fail, and no one knows why. Throughout history, some of the most intimate moments of trust have been weaponized by people willing to kill quietly. Poison has been called the coward's weapon. The silent killer. The method of choice for those who want death to look like illness, bad luck, or fate. But what makes certain poisons so deadly? How do they work inside the body? And who are the killers who turned chemistry into murder? Today, we examine the deadliest poisons used in real murders, from Victorian teacups to Cold War umbrellas, from household painkillers to radioactive assassination. Some of these killers escaped detection for years. Others changed international law. This is the dark science of death by poison. In Victorian England, if a relative suddenly fell ill after dinner, people blamed food, bad water, or germs. But sometimes the real problem was who had cooked the meal. If there was ever a golden age of poison, it was Victorian Britain. And the king of all poisons was arsenic. Tasteless, almost odorless, colorless when dissolved, and for centuries, virtually undetectable. It was sold in chemists for killing rats and brightening green dyes. Anyone with a few coins could walk in and buy enough to wipe out a family. No one understood this better than Mary Ann Cotton. Born in 1832 in County Durham, Mary Ann would become one of Britain's most notorious serial killers. Her weapon of choice? Arsenic, often slipped into tea. Between 1852 and 1872, death followed Mary Ann Cotton wherever she went. 3 husbands, a lover, her own mother, and at least 11 of her children and stepchildren. Doctors wrote the same thing on certificate after certificate: gastric fever, stomach trouble, diarrhea and vomiting. In Victorian England, this didn't raise immediate suspicion. Cholera, typhoid, contaminated food, stomach illnesses were common. A woman losing multiple children was tragic, but not unusual. What people didn't realize was that Mary Ann wasn't simply cursed by bad luck. She was collecting life insurance payments. Her undoing began in 1872. After her 3rd husband, Frederick Cotton, died suddenly, Mary Ann tried to send her 7-year-old stepson, Charles Edward Cotton, to a workhouse. Authorities refused. Mary Ann reportedly replied, "I won't be troubled long." Days later, Charles was dead. This time, a doctor was suspicious. He preserved tissue samples and requested a post-mortem. Tests revealed massive quantities of arsenic. Mary Ann Cotton was arrested. At her trial, the defense argued that Charles might have inhaled arsenic from the green wallpaper in their home, a real risk at the time, since arsenic was widely used as a pigment. But when investigators exhumed several bodies connected to Mary Ann, they found arsenic again and again. On March 24, 1873, Mary Ann Cotton was executed at Durham Jail. The hanging was poorly calculated. The drop was too short. Instead of an instant broken neck, witnesses reported a prolonged strangulation lasting several minutes. Conservative estimates suggest Mary Ann Cotton killed at least 21 people. Some researchers believe the true number was higher. Newspapers called her the West Auckland Borgia, comparing her to the infamous Italian family known for poison plots. Her crimes had a lasting impact. Public fear and high-profile cases like hers helped push Britain towards stricter control of poisons. Arsenic, once as easy to buy as sugar, now required records, signatures, and regulation. The age of casual arsenic purchases was coming to an end. If arsenic was the poison of the Victorian era, thallium became the poison of the 20th century. Discovered in 1861, thallium is a soft, gray metal with terrifying properties. It's tasteless, odorless, dissolves in water, and its symptoms, hair loss, nerve damage, severe pain, can resemble many other diseases. Forensic toxicologists call it the poisoner's poison. And no one took advantage of that more chillingly than a teenager from North London named Graham Young. Born in 1947, Graham was fascinated by chemistry. While other boys read comic books, he devoured toxicology textbooks. While other teenagers experimented with music or dating, Graham experimented with poisons. On the people closest to him. At just 14, Graham began secretly dosing his family with antimony and then thallium. His stepmother, Molly, began suffering terrible stomach cramps, weakness, and unexplained illness. She deteriorated over months. In April 1962, she died. The cause was recorded as a spinal problem. In reality, Graham later admitted he had switched to thallium the night before, giving her enough to kill several people. Suspicious relatives contacted doctors and, eventually, the police. Graham was arrested and eventually confessed to poisoning multiple family members. Because Molly had been cremated, there was no physical proof of murder. At 14, Graham was sent to Broadmoor Hospital for the criminally insane rather than tried as an adult killer. 9 years later, in 1971, psychiatrists declared him cured of his obsession with poisons. He was released. What they didn't realize was that during his years in Broadmoor, Graham had continued reading everything he could on toxicology. He hadn't lost his obsession. He'd refined it. Graham found work at a photographic supply company in Bovingdon, Hertfordshire. Broadmoor provided a reference that omitted his history as a poisoner. His new colleagues had no idea who they were working with. Within months, staff at the factory began falling mysteriously ill. Supervisor Bob Eggle developed severe stomach pain, lost his hair, and suffered nerve damage. He died in July 1971. Another colleague, Fred Biggs, developed similar symptoms. He also died. Dozens more experienced lesser symptoms, weakness, tremors, numbness, some with permanent damage. Workers called it the Bovingdon bug, convinced they were dealing with a strange virus. Graham couldn't resist showing off. During workplace conversations, he explained, in unnerving detail, how thallium poisoning worked. The dosage, the progression of symptoms, the internal damage. His unusual knowledge and cold detachment eventually alarmed colleagues enough that they contacted police. When investigators searched his lodging, they made a chilling discovery. A diary meticulously recording each poisoning with names, dates, and doses. Notes beside victims stating whether he intended to let them live or die. Significant quantities of antimony and thallium, far more than needed to kill. Nazi paraphernalia on the walls, suggesting an obsession with power and control. At his 1972 trial, the press nicknamed him the Teacup Poisoner. Graham reportedly disliked the nickname, feeling it trivialized what he saw as his scientific achievements. He was convicted of multiple counts of murder and attempted murder and sentenced to life in prison. In Parkhurst Prison, he befriended another notorious killer, Ian Brady, the Moors murderer. On August 1, 1990, Graham Young died in his cell at the age of 42. The official cause was heart failure. Some speculate that the boy who loved experiments may have carried out one final test on himself. By the 21st century, poison had moved from family kitchens to the world of international espionage. And no case showed that shift more dramatically than the death of Alexander Litvinenko. Litvinenko was a former officer of Russia's FSB, the successor to the KGB. In 1998, he did something almost unheard of in that world. He publicly accused his superiors of corruption, extortion, and ordering assassinations. He was arrested, acquitted, rearrested, and eventually fled to London in 2000 with his family, where he was granted asylum and later British citizenship. From London, Litvinenko continued investigating Russian organized crime and state corruption. According to British intelligence, he was still in the game. On November 1, 2006, Litvinenko met two Russian men, Andrei Lugovoy and Dmitry Kovtun, at the Pine Bar of the Millennium Hotel in London. They had tea together. That evening, Litvinenko became violently ill. Vomiting. Severe abdominal pain. Rapid decline. Doctors suspected poisoning and tested for thallium. The results were negative. They tried standard treatments for heavy metal poisoning. Nothing worked. His hair fell out. His bone marrow failed. His organs began to shut down. From his hospital bed, Litvinenko made a statement, saying he believed Russian authorities were behind his poisoning and that those responsible showed no respect for life, liberty, or any civilized value. On November 22, 2006, just hours before his death, specialists finally identified the poison: polonium-210. Polonium-210 is a rare radioactive isotope. 1 gram has the potential to kill tens of millions of people if properly dispersed. It emits alpha particles, a type of radiation that does extreme damage inside the body but doesn't easily penetrate skin or travel far in air. That means it doesn't trigger ordinary Geiger counters and requires specialized equipment to detect. It had never been documented as a murder weapon before. Litvinenko became the first confirmed victim. The investigation that followed was unlike anything Scotland Yard had ever handled. Using radiation detectors, investigators traced polonium contamination across more than 40 locations: hotels, restaurants, offices, aeroplanes. The invisible trail led back to Lugovoy and Koftan's movements, and then, ultimately, to Moscow. British prosecutors charged both men with murder. Russia refused extradition. In 2016, a British public inquiry concluded that Litvinenko's killing was probably approved by then FSB Director Nikolai Patrushev and Russian President Vladimir Putin. In 2021, the European Court of Human Rights ruled that Russia was responsible for his death and ordered compensation to his widow. No one has been brought to a British courtroom for the first known radioactive assassination in history. Decades before polonium, another exotic poison was used on the streets of London, this time in the middle of the Cold War. The weapon? A modified umbrella. The poison? Ricin. Georgi Markov was a Bulgarian novelist and playwright who defected to the West in 1969. From London, he broadcast sharp, often humorous criticism of Bulgaria's communist regime on the BBC and Radio Free Europe. His broadcasts infuriated the country's leader, Todor Zhivkov, who reportedly wanted Markov silenced forever. On September 7, 1978, Zhivkov's birthday, Markov was waiting for a bus on Waterloo Bridge. He suddenly felt a sharp sting in the back of his right thigh. He turned and saw a man pick up an umbrella from the ground. The stranger apologized in a foreign accent, hailed a taxi, and left. That evening, Markov developed a high fever. Within days, he was in hospital with escalating symptoms: pain, organ failure, rapid deterioration. On September 11th, 4 days after the encounter, Georgi Markov died. The autopsy revealed something extraordinary. Embedded in his thigh was a tiny metal pellet, just 1.7 millimeters across, smaller than a pinhead. The pellet was made from platinum and iridium. 2 microscopic holes had been drilled through it, forming a cavity designed to hold poison. Scientists at Britain's Porton Down laboratory concluded that the pellet had almost certainly contained ricin. Ricin is derived from castor beans, the same plant used to make castor oil. The oil is harmless. The protein ricin is anything but. As little as a few hundred micrograms, roughly a grain of salt, can be lethal. There is no widely available antidote. The suspected design was ingenious. A spring or gas-powered umbrella fired the pellet into Markov's leg. Once inside the body, a wax or sugar coating melted, releasing the ricin. Later investigations pointed to Bulgaria's secret police, allegedly with technical support from the Soviet KGB. After the fall of communism, investigators reportedly found modified umbrellas in Bulgarian security archives. But officially, the case remains unsolved. The man with the umbrella has never been definitively identified. The idea that someone could bump into you on a crowded bridge, say, "sorry," and leave you dying days later turned the umbrella into a symbol of Cold War terror. Poison is often a personal weapon: a spouse, a lover, a colleague. The killer knows the victim. But in 1982, someone in Chicago showed how easily a stranger could turn an everyday product into a silent, random weapon. The murder method? Over-the-counter painkillers. On September 29, 1982, 12-year-old Mary Kellerman woke up with a sore throat. Her parents gave her a single extra-strength Tylenol capsule. By 7 a.m., she was dead. That same day, postal worker Adam Janis took Tylenol for chest pain. He collapsed and died hours later. His brother Stanley and sister-in-law Teresa came to his house to mourn. Grieving and exhausted, they took Tylenol from the same bottle. Both died within 2 days. By the end of the week, 7 people in the Chicago area had died after taking extra-strength Tylenol. Tests revealed the cause: potassium cyanide. Investigators discovered that someone had purchased bottles of Tylenol, opened them, emptied some capsules, refilled them with cyanide, and then quietly returned the packages to store shelves. The victims were completely random. They had never met their killer. Johnson & Johnson recalled 31 million bottles of Tylenol, worth more than $100 million, in one of the largest product recalls in history. Stores nationwide removed pain relievers from shelves. A man named James William Lewis sent a letter to Johnson & Johnson demanding $1 million to stop the killing. He was convicted of extortion and served time in prison, but he has always denied being the actual poisoner. Despite one of the biggest investigations in FBI history, the Chicago Tylenol murders remain officially unsolved. Their legacy, however, is everywhere. In response, Congress passed the Federal Anti-Tampering Act, making it a federal crime to tamper with consumer products. The FDA introduced strict rules requiring tamper-evident packaging, safety seals, plastic wrap, child-resistant caps. The next time you struggle to open a bottle of aspirin, peeling off plastic, puncturing foil, fighting a childproof cap, you're dealing with layers of protection that exist because 7 strangers in Chicago never went home. If the Litvinenko case showed that radioactive poisoning was now part of statecraft, events in Salisbury, England in March 2018 proved that nerve agents were, too. Sergei Skripal was a former Russian military intelligence officer who secretly spied for Britain. Caught and convicted in Russia, he was later freed in a 2010 spy swap and settled in the peaceful cathedral city of Salisbury. On March 4, 2018, Skripal and his daughter Yulia were found unconscious on a park bench. They had been exposed to Novichok, a group of military-grade nerve agents developed by the Soviet Union, believed to be several times more lethal than VX. Novichok attacks the nervous system, causing convulsions, breathing failure, and often, death. The Skripals survived only thanks to rapid emergency treatment and intensive care. Investigators traced the contamination back to the front door handle of Skripal's home. CCTV footage showed 2 men, traveling under the names Alexander Petrov and Ruslan Basharov, arriving in Salisbury the day before the attack. The story did not end with the Skripals. For months later, in nearby Amesbury, a woman named Dawn Sturgis found what appeared to be a perfume bottle in a charity bin. It had allegedly been used to transport Novichok and discarded. Dawn sprayed the liquid on her wrist. She died 8 days later, an innocent victim of a failed assassination. The Skripal poisoning triggered the largest collective expulsion of Russian diplomats in history, over 150 officials removed from 28 countries. British prosecutors charged Petrov and Basharov in absentia. Russia has denied involvement. Like the Litvinenko case, the suspected assassins remain outside British jurisdiction. From arsenic in Victorian teacups to nerve agents on door handles, poison has remained the invisible weapon, chosen by those who want death to look like disease, accident, or bad luck. The killers we've looked at used very different substances. Mary and Cotton used arsenic because it was cheap and widely available. Graham Young used thallium because he was obsessed with its effects. Intelligence services turned to polonium and Novichok because they believed these specialized substances would be almost impossible to trace. The Tylenol killer chose cyanide because it could be hidden in something millions of people buy without thinking. All of them believed that poison would conceal their crimes. All of them were eventually exposed, at least in part, by science. Forensic toxicology has advanced dramatically since Mary and Cotton's time. Today, labs can detect tiny amounts of poison in blood, hair, and tissue. Radiation signatures can be followed across cities. Even decades-old remains can sometimes reveal what really happened. No poison is truly undetectable anymore. But the impulse behind it, to kill quietly, to maintain distance, to control the story, remains. For every case we know, there may be others misdiagnosed as natural causes. Victims buried with the wrong cause of death written on the certificate. Killers who were never even suspected. The history of poison is, in many ways, the history of betrayal. The spouse who uses a wedding cup as a weapon. The employee who stirs death into the office tea. The state that turns everyday objects, a teapot, a door handle, a perfume bottle, into delivery systems for nerve agents. The next time you pour a drink, open a pill bottle, or sit down to a meal with someone you trust, remember, for most of history, that's exactly where poisoners like to hide. This documentary is dedicated to the memory of all victims of poisoning, those whose stories became headlines, and those whose deaths were never recognized for what they truly were. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, please contact your local emergency services. If you suspect poisoning, contact your regional poison control center or medical professionals right away. Thank you for watching. If you found this video informative, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications. Your support helps us continue creating educational true crime content. Stay curious and stay safe.